To speak to you this morning. I was thinking whether or not I should talk to you through something that Sid Lee, the agency that I work today, has done. It's naturally something that my agency very much wants. They would love for me to come and explore with you guys a lot of the amazing, effective things that we've done. But I thought it was going to be a little boring. So I decided to kind of deal with that, which was to say, I'm going to show everyone the amazing things we've done, and then we're not going to talk about Sid Lee anymore. We're going to talk about everyone else. So this is the deal that I've done. For 3 minutes, I just wanted to run you guys by some of the work that I'm extremely proud of having done, and very effective too. Maybe we'll start again. Maybe it won't work. Let's see.
A mobile.
Yes.
An ejecutivo. A social community. A global event. An exhibition. What do these things have in common? To most agencies, nothing. But to us, they're one and the same. There are moments of truth that define your brand. By mixing creative disciplines like no one else, we develop innovative consumer experiences. And nobody does it better. Consumer experiences is how we deliver stellar results for our clients, and it's what we call commercial creativity.
All right, so that's us, that's Sid Lee. Now we're going to go to other things, now that we got that out of the way. Today, the title of my lecture to you guys, it's kind of a deranged idea that I've had in mind for a little while. And it's about trying to convince you that the stories that you're telling on behalf of your brand to connect with consumers, they're not as efficient as you imagine. So my point of view is that if we allow consumers to generate their own stories and pass that onwards, that's the most effective way of working and trying to attach ourselves into consumers' minds emotionally. So let's see if I make some sense, and then you will tell me at the end of it. Sorry. So, what are stories? This is one of the things that were very exciting to me since I started working as a creative director. Stories as a device to move on ideas from people to people, from community to community. It's also a device of bonding. It allows us to understand the world around us. It allows us to tell our friends what we believe in, and even tell ourselves. And if you think about all the stories that have survived in the oral tradition, there are stories that are extremely interesting, but they carry within them a very important message usually. And that's the moral of the story. So what story is this? Can you guys guess? How's it called in Spanish? Yes, that's exactly what it is. Little Red Riding Hood. And what's the moral of the story, if you remember what the story is about? Remember? Little Red Riding Hood goes into the forest, she meets the wolf, tells the wolf that she's going to go see grandma, and then horrible things happen after that. Right? So the moral of the story is, be careful who you trust. These are things we tell our kids, because that's one of the lessons we want them to learn. There is a very, very interesting story in Brazil that is the headless mule. Because Brazil and Spain share a lot of this sensuality and sexuality in the air, I'll tell you what the story is, and you try to help me figure out what the moral of the story is. Every woman who has sex with the priest gets transformed into a headless mule every full moon, and they haunt around the city and stuff, and there's like fire coming out of the head. So this is so that they learn not to have sex with the priest. And it's an important message that was passed in Brazil at the times of colonization. And if you look into different countries and different societies, each one of their stories tells something about who they are, right? There's something way inside. The purpose of the story of Momotaro, I lived in Japan for a little while, and it's one of the things that if you have encountered Japanese people, you know very well that this story, that's the main story told to kids, is also something that is in the Japanese psyche, and it's very ingrained. It's about working together. This little guy that came in a peach in the beginning of times, he helped fight demons, and on his quest to fight the demons, he's met 3 friends. I think it's a dog, a pheasant, and a monkey. So they work together to defeat the demons. If he had just gone himself as a hero, as a single hero, he would have failed. So this is very much what's in the psyche of the Japanese people still to this day, a very important story. What is this story? Don Quixote. Yeah? So I was looking online and I've read the book and I was trying to make sense out of, a lot of people say that it has a different moral underneath, and there was just so much stuff. And this is what I collected. Happiness lies in the continual pursuit of an idea. So this seems to be why we tell the story, why we relate to the story. It's something that I find attractive, something that I would want to be associated with, something that makes me excited. I want my kids to take on.
Thank you, Ignacio, President Robe, dear IOC members, ladies and gentlemen. I have the chance to speak to many of you in private conversations, and also in our presentations in St. Petersburg and in Lausanne. I must say, I'd like to continue our friendship, and frankly, I don't want this to be our last chance to speak to each other. So let me tell you a little more about my beautiful hometown, Madrid.
This is an amazing story. It's a very recent story. It's a Madrid story, and it's the story of the Madrid bid to the 2020 Olympic. And what would you think is the moral of this story? It has a moral. I'm trying to be very, very tame when I say that way, but the moral of this story to me, who caught this all the way from Amsterdam, is always find someone to blame. It's so funny that I was asking around why that existed. Why was she really the one to blame for this? Nobody really knows, but it's an interesting story. Anyway, so if you think about the oral tradition times in which stories were passed from people to people and around in a group of friends, or physically. The only stories that survived were the stories that were interesting enough. So in the oral traditions, stories that survived were the interesting stories that contain a powerful message, right? So they grabbed attention, they spread very quickly, based on merit. When the broadcast era came about, this equation started to change. What happened then was the advent of mass media channels. So all of a sudden you have stories that enter our lives very, very quickly, very powerfully, right? So they grab our attention, they spread very fast, because the brands command the media that makes them spread. But it's based on purchasing power, it's based on money. So for a long, long time in our lives, we had this huge division between the stories that were extremely interesting and some stories that were not very interesting, but they were bothering us in between magazines during commercial breaks. So look at this. This is how stories spread. Right? And you speak to your friends, you group of friends, it intersects with other stories. But then a brand having the power to control the medium, the mass media, it actually supersedes all those conversations. This all has changed. I think you've heard about this maybe 10 years ago if you work in this industry long enough. But I'm not here to tell you again the very obvious, that in the digital era everything changed. But if you look at it now, because we control the mass medium today, we have the power, the people have the power to put a single very interesting story on YouTube, and it will spread much beyond anything that we pay for. We, the advertisers, we, the advertising agency. This equation has changed dramatically. So now we have the power to spread our own stories, the ones that really interest us. Very, very, very fun. And the brand is competing in that scenario. On top of that, of course, you will have saturation of message. You will have the commoditization of the offers. You will have people controlling as well devices that get rid of your commercial. Nobody clicks on banners. So it's a very, very new scenario for us to work with. So my point is that brands now have to go back to telling very interesting stories, but more than that, they need to be able to allow our consumers to create their own stories, right? So we go back to grabbing attention, making it spread, and going back to being merit-based and not money-based. So this is a little bit of what I'm going to talk to you guys about today. Right? And this is, again, it's my own theory. You will tell me at the end if it makes any sense. So we get to a new phase of brand storytelling, the one that I believe in, the one that I helped develop at Sid Lee. There's 3 important points when you develop your brand story these days. To me, these are very key points. One is to find your purpose. Here in the panel, we're talking a little bit about purpose, purpose in marketing. We know that it affects the bottom line immensely. So there's nothing new about that. But if you think about it, it's something that brands are jumping onto right now. If you don't have a meaning behind your brand, you have to manufacture it very, very quickly. This is what happened with Secret. Secret had a very specific brand purpose a long time ago, and it's been working with that. But for a while, for whatever the reason, this is another discussion, long-term benefits, short-term benefits. For a little while, it started to forget about why it existed. That's the why inside the engine. And slowly, it descended onto very rational reasons to connect with people. So this one amazing guy went in for a workshop inside Secret and tried to take out from the marketing managers and the CMO what exactly was the brand purpose. This was about 8 years ago. And he told me that a lot of what came out was something along these lines. Our purpose is to make women not sweat, right? And in the end, he worked with them to actually find what was behind the product, the history of the product, coming out in the United States when women were becoming empowered to take on the workforce and to work. So it was not about just keeping women dry. It was about empowering them to win in life and to get to what they want. So it's much, much, much deeper. This story now has a very interesting meaning. and a very interesting model. And when you look across some of the very successful brands today, if they do their job really well, which is not only to find the purpose, but to connect at every point of contact they have with consumers, and actually allow that purpose to flourish, you'll see that it's very evident. In Coca-Cola, it's about generating happiness or allowing people to see the optimist side of life. Secret is about empowering women. Gap is about reinforcing American values. So if you look into the product itself, you'll notice that all the product is carefully crafted and everything else around as well, not just the product, to reinforce American values, the traditions of American values. One thing that's really, really important too, as you connect yourself to the brand purpose, you have to deliver it. This is the new fad, purpose marketing. But if you don't deliver it, if it's just on your dialogue and in your speech, it can backfire very quickly. So this is something that I found on the comic strip, and I thought it was really, really relevant. Our consumers are becoming very, very effective in smelling the bullshit behind our messages. So we have to really be able to deliver it. The second thing that was also talked about in the panel is to invite to action. For a long, long time, we have not been inviting people to action. We've just been inspiring them. So we leave it off, we leave our communication off at, this is inspiring, go and do it yourself. Now we're actually trying to invite them to action.